It is building a business in a way that gives you the ability to grow on retained earnings and grow, build, and control the way that you want to, I think is, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, is the
Yeah.
ultimate freedom. And it's profitability is freedom. It is sleep at night.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the High Voltage Business Builders podcast. I've got an exciting guest here today. We're going to be talking about profitability and the business of profitability, everything from startups to experienced businesses. We find the same kind of challenges in today's climate, which may or may not be different than other climates in the past. My guest is going to talk a little bit about that today. And then we're going to focus on what it takes to really build a business and stay profitable, which is going to be important. So Adam, thanks for coming on, Joe.
Thanks for having me, Neil. Excited to be here.
So let's unpack this idea of profitability, because it's always something people talk about. I talk about it predominantly. I know a lot of people focus on the vanity metrics of revenue and think it's really cool to say I made $5 million, and then you look at their P&L and find out they made about $100,000 after all the taxes were said and done, right? So what does profitability really mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great KPI. I love the KPIs, but you're at a networking thing, and the first question everybody always asks is, well, how many employees do you have?
Right.
And that is just the worst indicator for, air quotes, success in a business possible, which is equal to where's your revenue? I guess revenue is probably a better indicator than just
well, it's a signal, of course, of market conditions and your value of the market when people are purchasing your products in mass. I mean, that's cool, right?
And I guess it's probably not polite to say, how's your net profit doing?
Well, you think about it in terms of business ownership, and everybody's like, yeah, how's your net profit? Like, how's your business doing? Like, it's doing great. And then everybody's like, there's a level of corporate. I came from one corporate world. I'm not sure we'll get to yours and see if you have a corporate background, but it was, you never talk about what people's salaries were. Like, that's rude. But in the business world, all of a sudden it's like, well, how much does your business do? Well, like, that's like walking up to somebody like, how much do you make a year? Like, where does it?
100%. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, from a profitability standpoint, I think it's changing right now, which is really good because it's getting harder to raise money.
Yeah.
So, and that's happened over the course of the last year or two, but 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, I mean, there was so much free cash flow and dry powder, as they call it, that anybody could raise money on at crazy valuations, get huge amounts of money on anything. And now that's tightening up. We're seeing a shift towards those companies that were able to just kind of go and spend freely and chase some of the KPIs that aren't super helpful.
Yeah.
We're having to tighten up and now really get serious about profitability. But from my standpoint, profitability is freedom. It is sleep at night. It is building a business in a way that gives you the ability to grow on retained earnings and grow, build, and control the way that you want to, I think is, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, is the ultimate freedom. And it's quite frankly, the only thing I've ever done. So it is, to be fair, the only thing I know.
Yeah. Well, it's not bad to be an expert in your niche. It's just the longer you stay there, obviously creates credibility. But having raised or built a company to more than $8 million in sales, if I'm not mistaken, on your e-commerce journey, can you tell us a little bit about how that process evolved for you?
Yeah, with BottleKeeper, that was my last company. My cousin Matt Campbell and I started that in 2013. I had sold out of a medical device company before that was big and heavy, and it was really difficult to manage. There was like 80 people in multiple states and delivery vehicles and warehouses and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then we had spun off a technology piece that I sold in 2013, vowed to never, ever do that version of a business again. So it certainly wasn't corporate. I mean, I went into it as a pretty true startup. But from there, going into BottleKeeper, technology was at a place that allowed us to put really strict guardrails in place around adding team members to the company and having employees. And so we decided really early on that we were going to build a scalable business on technology and automations and things that could still be very personal, but do that in a way that did not require us to hire employees. And so when you kind of like stick that post in the sand, like we are not going to cross this line, it forced us to think a certain way. Now, at the same time, it also forced us to be really lean.
Yeah.
And so we were able to invest heavily. The business was profitable for year one, and we were able to reinvest that. And we weren't taking that profit. We were investing all of it. We didn't pay ourselves for the first 2 years of that business. Even it was making millions of dollars and we still weren't paying ourselves. We were heavily reinvesting in that business.
Reinvesting in the growth for future. Yeah.
And that's really smart. The result of that is, we got in the first 3 years, we got to $8 million in sales with no employees, obviously no investors or any of that stuff, because it was profitable. We could afford to heavily invest in the business.
So you started taking profit somewhere around year 3 then?
Yeah, we paid ourselves. I literally still have the check. It's hanging on my wall in my office. It was like $500 or something. The first pay we took.
So how were you
would have been in
yourself?
2016.
Like if someone's thinking, okay, well, how did you manage? How would I pull that off? How did you pull that off? Not taking anything but a $500 check in 3 years to build your business. How would I do that?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, we didn't need to do that. We were in a position to do it because Matt had another business he was operating with his family. So he was drawing income from that. I had done pretty well in my prior company. I didn't have kids at the time. I have them now, totally different situation. My wife was very successful in the medical device world. So we had enough income to get by. I mean, we certainly we weren't living large by any stretch. She was able largely to float us for that period of time till Matt and I agreed that it made sense.
Well, and it's actually smart. I tell people this all the time. People are like, do I just quit my job and start this business? And I'm like, no, time out. If there's a revenue method you've got of some kind that funds you 100%. And continually funds you while you get this business off the ground, and in the first 12 to 18 months, reinvest everything back into the business, it'll just go that much faster. It'll be easier to take more profits. And by the time you get 3 or 4 months of profits that match income, then you can, ditch whatever it was you were doing. I don't always like to hear that, right? But it's really the right thing to say, I think. What do you think?
And I 100% agree with you. And I get asked the question a lot as well. And yeah, there is a point that you got to take the step off the cliff, but like, let's mitigate the risk, which is what most of startup stuff is about, right? It's about trying to maximize the upside and minimize the downside. So how do we minimize the downside for as much as possible? And if you can get paid do nothing, like keep getting paid for months or years while you mitigate the risk to get this thing going. I mean, that is a beautiful situation.
Well, there's those who also like they're back against the wall and they're fighters and they want to come out swinging. That's me.
That's a choice.
But you can go down burning if you're not careful.
There's risk.
There's risk.
We're all adults. You have to make your own decisions. But
well, of course, you got to own it.
As long as you understand that, that's great.
Yeah, you got to own it and grow with it. So as you move forward past that and you went into it and kept profitability as a focus, where is that taking you on your journey? Like, where are you at in 2024?
Yeah, so that was 2016. We continued to grow into tens of millions. We did end up hiring a couple of people. We got acquired in 2021 by a private equity group. We got put underneath Arctic Outdoors, which is a big outdoor company. But even then, we were an 8-figure business. We only had 4 team members. So being lean was just a natural part of the business. It was built into the foundation. We did end up on Shark Tank, which I know we'll surely get into here at some point. But post-acquisition started there. There are some systems and things that we built in the company that we just did to solve our own problems, largely that drove the profitability, gave us the clarity and the real-time visual into the business to understand what levers to pull and how hard to pull them, mostly with respect to customer acquisition and expenses. And that was just us solving our own problems because nothing existed for an early stage company like ours. And it was a traditional e-com. There wasn't anything super fancy or flashy about it. It was e-com.
Where did you get your start on the e-com side? Did you have your own website? Did you go to Shopify or Amazon FBA? Where were you guys?
Yeah. So when we started in 2013, I built the first site on WordPress with WooCommerce. Yeah. We operated that for probably a year and a half. And then it got to the point where we had too much traffic for me to be managing bandwidth and doing things that I had no idea how to do. So we did migrate to Shopify, and we're on Shopify for the rest of the business.
And they've been good platform partner for you?
Yeah, they were great. I mean, we were there probably not in Shopify's total journey, but we were there in 2015, probably 15 through 21.
Big time for them. Yeah.
Yeah. So we saw a lot of the expansion and the growth and the changes to the plans. And obviously in the middle of that, it went from being a really inexpensive to a really expensive platform.
Right. A lot of
tens of millions in revenue. Yeah.
Well, and now they're watching their stock take that
changes.
problem.
I know.
Their stock goes down quite fast with some of the changes they've made recently. I think it was like a 20% decline.
There are alternatives now, which
there are definitely
many, unless you wanted to do it yourself. Yeah.
Well, sure. Customization is one thing. We is right on the Amazon FBA platform because it's a logistical company. If you think about it, really, at the end of the day, it's a very strong logistic company that operates multi-channel fulfillment for us. So it's one way to mitigate that. You mentioned the risk and the growth. And of course, there was a risk taking a shot at Shark Tank. You want to unpack that for us a second?
Yeah. I mean, this was 2018. We filmed. We started going through the process. We had someone in production reach out to us in like 2015. They saw a Facebook ad. And it took a couple of years to get through the process because the whole premise of BombKeeper again was to build lean. My wife and I were out of the country 4 or 5 months of the year because I could operate the business anywhere that we had internet. And that was the thesis of that business.
Yeah.
So it took us a couple of years to get through Shark Tank. By the time we got on Shark Tank, we were way too big to be on Shark Tank. Wow. But it was just this epic opportunity. I mean, we filmed the show a week before Father's Day, which was really lucky because Father's Day was a massive holiday period for us.
Right.
So I was able to say, like in our opening pitch, that we had done $1 million in revenue in the week leading up to that.
That's pretty good hook.
Which is pretty ridiculous. I mean, Mark Cuban's actual quote on the show, which of course made headlines on like CNBC and everything, was, "You're either the worst business people in the world or you don't need to be here."
Yeah.
So they beat us. Of the 55 minutes we taped, which they convert into 7 minutes of airing time or whatever, they just beat the hell out of us for probably 45 of those 55 minutes. on metrics and numbers, and
it was
it's
a
totally
good marketing
understandable. Like
move.
we were ready for that. We were fully expected that to
Yeah.
happen, but we went in with very open minds with a thesis to do. We asked for $1 million for 5%, and we wanted to get Mark and Lori, and we got Mark and Lori for $1 million for 5%. So getting a deal, we got exactly what we had gone in to do. Now, in hindsight, we didn't end up doing the deal in real life because lots of stuff happens and changes after the fact.
Well, you mentioned you got family now, you've got kids, and that changes the dynamic. How has that changed it for you?
The kids and family part hasn't really, because I built unintentionally with Bottle Keeper, I built that business around my life. And so I learned how to do that and how to kind of set boundaries and priorities. And so adding kids into our situation really already had those sort of ground rules in place. So it's been amazing. I have a 5 and a just recently 3-year-old.
Oh,
So
great ages,
we're in the
very
little,
fast-moving
yeah,
kids.
they're so much fun. Yeah. Yeah.
Keeps you
Extremely
young
fun.
at heart, right?
Yeah.
Very
Definitely.
cool. So as profitability is
Yeah.
the focus of your life moving forward, what have you been working on most recently that's kind of at the forefront of your mind, things currently daily, weekly, monthly actions, right?
Yeah, the short answer to that is Pentane. After we got acquired, I took some time off, as was directed by a wise old man. Told me to not go jam a square peg into a round hole and start another company immediately. So I got bored after a little bit and did some consulting, went into some companies that we'd invested in, and quickly realized that even if they were profitable and growing, they didn't actually understand how the business made money. Like they didn't understand the math and the metrics, so they didn't know how to pull levers. And it was fairly revelatory because I was able to go in and rebuild in much sexier way some of the systems that we had built at Bottle Keeper, and it completely changed their outcomes.
Yeah.
And then I got paid as an advisor to go and help turn around a business that was in pretty bad shape, that they were losing $100,000 a month. They had 5 months of runway left, and effectively did the same thing, went and rebuilt systems with a lot of complex math that answered a lot of questions for them. And it allowed them to make much better decisions about both how they were spending expenses on team members and offices and all these things, as well as how they were paying to acquire customers. They were underspending on ad spend by a third of what versus what they needed to spend to even have the chance to get to break. Yeah. So that was, and that completely changed the company. Within 2 months, they were profitable. Now they're up 240%, crushing, doing extremely well. And so that was the light bulb, like this has to be a system. So Pentane is a profitability platform that takes expense, revenue, and ad data from P&Ls and all the revenue channels and things that we have and compiles all that complex math. So it simplifies it for the user. So a user can just go in and see, we need to spend this amount of ad spend at this return on ad spend in order to get to break even or generate a 5% net margin or a 15 or whatever it is that is our goal for the business. And then get to track those outcomes in real time so you can see whether or not it's working today, not when you get your P&L in 5 weeks and see that it did or did not.
I love that. I love that because you get more real-time data, which is important for the speed at which business is moving today, isn't it? The speed of business, the amount of ads, the traffic, the cost per click and everything and CPMs. If you're going to be spending media today, you've got to be smart on 100%. How you're acquiring or what it takes to actually acquire those customers. Because if it takes you $50 or $100, then that's what it takes. So now you got to figure out how to make it profitable, right?
Yeah. I mean, we see that early stage companies, and I've been guilty of this before. You have a little bit of success, start generating some revenue and think it's going to go on for forever. And that growth is going to go on for forever. So you start hiring because you think that you need bodies and people to solve the problems, and you need an office. And you don't just need an office, you need an office that you can grow into. And so you take this machine that's starting to work, and then you add all this weight to it. And it may continue to work a little bit, but you do that having no idea the negative impact that adding that much weight to the business is going to have. And suddenly you go from being maybe slightly profitable to massively upside down, and you don't really know why.
Yeah.
So just a huge part of the system is just helping the operators, whoever's running the business, the founders, the CMOs, COs, whoever it is, to understand how those expenses and things impact the business. And if they're going to add those expenses, fine. But where does the revenue and the ROAS need to go in order to pay for that expense? Yeah. And that's just critical parts of
instead of blindly throwing ads against the wall or marketing against 100%. The wall or whatever it is, you can kind of get a specific look at how to track that. Yeah. And I respect that because everything we do on our end is about the business fundamental of profitability that begets growth. And without that, you can't have scale. Everybody wants to jump straight to scale, but forgets their steps in the process of doing that. And what are some of those, maybe the 3 steps you could walk somebody who's listening is through right now that would get their mind kind of on the right path? Yeah,
I think the number one thing is do not solve problems with payroll. Like that is the number one killer of early operating success is solving problems with payroll. We're at a time, particularly with we don't need to go unless you really want to, down the super rabbit hole of AIs and all these things. But we're at a time where technology, this was the case in 2013, 14, 15, and we're a decade ahead of that now. So it's all advanced. We're at a time where technology will solve most problems. And if you have to add a person, that's okay, but understand how you're going to pay for that person. And is that person a revenue driving person? Like, I feel like the KPI that we all should be talking about is revenue per employee. Like that should be the networking question is what's your revenue per employee rate? Is it $10,000 per employee or is it $2 million per employee? I mean, that to me is a really good indicator of health and efficiency inside of a business. So the first is, absolutely do not solve problems with payroll. The next is you really need to, and this has nothing to do with our system. If you can figure out how to do this stuff on your own or find something else, I love it. But you really need to be able to see what's happening in the business in order to make quick decisions. That is one of the biggest value points of being early stage, being a startup or whatever it is that we get to move really fast. It is really hard to move really fast, or at least to do so intelligently, if you don't have the information and the tools available to make decisions on the data today. So figure out whether it's to us or somebody else, you do it yourself, you have to figure out how to get access to real-time data in order to see what's working and what's not working. And the third is to just understand your ad dollars. We constantly see companies underspending on ads. And the reason I've been there before, I understand it. The reason is largely because we don't know how much we need to spend. So we spend on gut feel. We arbitrarily create ad budgets and just hope. We literally say this. We have third-party media agencies. It's like the company will come in and say, our ad budget is $50,000 a month, and we need you to return $2 million a month on revenue. And the agency's like, oh, well, I mean, that doesn't really work. That doesn't map, doesn't pencil at all.
You're talking about more than 1.2.
They'll do it. Yeah. I mean, it's like realistically, you're going to return 150 to 200,000. So it's really getting clarity around how you're spending ad dollars, because nobody is going to win in that equation. The company's not going to win. The paid media agency's not going to win. That's like a lose situation because we don't have clear data. So
I'm a data nerd and didn't meet their metrics and go on to different
100%, which is a big problem in the agency.
Propagating problems down the road, right?
100%. And that's one of the reasons we were working closely with the agencies is we're able to tell the company non-emotionally, like, it's not my opinion. This is just what the math says. You need to spend this amount of money over this period of time to generate this return on ad spend to get to break even or whatever your profitability goal is. And that's not the agency telling them to do that. That's just reality.
And willing to spend that means you're taking it from a competitor, right? Even if you're not necessarily, and this is where people get stuck in their brain, profitable on the acquisition initially of that customer, you better be doing a darn good job at providing me second, third, and fourth things they need in their business to keep coming back to you for those particular problem-solving opportunities. If you're just thinking of a single acquisition, which I think so many business owners do, at least in my opinion, especially in the physical product world, they think of single product acquisition. And I'm like, no, you need a portfolio of product. Like, I'm going to assume in your company, originally, your e-commerce company had one SKU. You're just one SKU guy. Is that how that whole works?
Totally. One color, one size.
One hero, one size. Yeah. It sounds like people are like, well, that's how I'm expecting it when they launch their first product. I'm like, no, you had how many SKUs roughly?
Oh, I mean, by the end of the company, we had a lot. And that becomes its own thing, is like managing SKU is a whole science in itself.
It is.
So we started with one size, one color because we did it quick. The customer told us what they wanted and we expanded quickly.
Yeah. The point being, expand quickly so you can then define what the market is, so you can build a portfolio of sellable products as opposed to single products. Therefore, if someone buys one thing, they can buy 10 things from you. It really changes the game. If people can really grasp that single concept, they'll catch on to what you're saying, which is knowing that they should be spending more to acquire that customer, having additional things for them to buy later on. So many people are like, you can't really acquire many things today, in my opinion, on ad networks in a single purchase. Would you agree?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. The name of the game is LTV.
Yeah, it is.
Got to figure out how to drive
defining
LTV.
how long that actually occurs within for your business, right?
Yeah.
Because I've seen people come in and define, well, my LTV in 90 days has to be X. Like, they got some of that right, but then they missed the point. They're like, well, what if it is Y? Well, no, it can't be Y. Like, it has to be X.
Yeah.
Okay, well, then you're going to lose.
Okay.
Like,
good luck. Yeah.
You're going to lose to the market, right? And I don't think business owners quite get that yet, especially those who are new. So if you're listening to this and you're new to business, grasp this concept before you go to business, and it's a big one. So that was your second. I don't mean to cut you off, but I think it was good to want to gain some clarity. And so you were on a roll. Sorry, don't want to interrupt you.
No, it was great. I mean, the third is driven around ad dollars. I mean, I will add to that. There's this concept that you are surely familiar with, and I know scares a lot of particularly early stage operators. This concept, it's an accounting concept, this metric of contribution margin. Contribution margin is the answer to most questions inside of a consumer business. It's a little complicated to get to. The math is not hard. It's just, I mean, contribution margin is your revenue minus your variable expenses. It is, I call them happy dollars. These are the dollars that pay what you have, your revenue minus your variable expenses. Variable expenses are things like cost of goods, shipping, fulfillment, credit card fees. The expenses that only exist when you make money.
Yeah.
So if you take your revenue and we subtract those expenses, the dollars that you have left is contribution margin. Those contribution margin dollars contribute to pay for the fixed expenses in the business. Like bottom line. If you have more contribution margin dollars than fixed expenses, that's your net profit.
Yeah.
So mathematically speaking, net profit equals contribution margin minus fixed expenses. So we can either, to impact net profit, we can increase contribution margin dollars, or we can decrease fixed expenses. We should be constantly doing both, but I can tell you, it's a lot easier to decrease fixed expenses than it is to dramatically increase contribution margin dollars. Doesn't mean it can't be done, but again, the whole purpose of the meditate system is to simplify this data and take things that are complex and a little bit difficult to get to and make them really easy to digest so we can make better decisions.
Now, for those who may have missed some of that, because you're super smart at what you know, but some people confuse and see this completely, the gross margin, gross net, net profit. Can you quickly define that out for fast metrics so people understand here who might be like, I understand my gross margin because they hear this a lot. I got 80% gross margin. It's like, but is it profitable?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. I mean, your gross profit is your revenue minus effectively your cost of goods, which does not include your credit card fees. It does not include shipping fulfillment to the customer. It does not include advertising, which can be a massive expense, right? So your gross margin includes variable expenses, which I appreciate can get a little bit confusing because it includes cost of goods. So I don't talk a lot about gross margin. It is important, particularly when you're looking at retail and wholesale and that sort of stuff. The two buckets that I think are really important are your fixed expenses and your variable expenses. Fixed expenses exist whether or not you make $1. They're payroll, health insurance, interest on debt, office expenses, all, the things that if you make $1, you make $10 million, you're going to pay those things. They can vary a little bit each month. So I understand that can be confusing, but they exist whether or not you make money. Variable expenses are the opposite. They only exist when you make money. So it's cost of goods, again, shipping, fulfillment, credit card fees. All these things that exist when you make money. The interaction between those things, those two numbers and your revenue. So if we make kind of a triangle trifecta here, the interaction between your revenue, your variable expenses, and your fixed expenses dictate your net profitability, which is at the end of the day, what you have left after that transaction or month or year. Right? So again, contribution margin as a scary metric, we can call them happy dollars because they are the happy dollars. The more happy dollars you have in the business, the healthier the business is doing, the more you can afford to reinvest in the company, the more you can afford to take off the table for yourself, whatever your goal is in the business. But it's all about driving more contribution margin dollars, usually by using more ad dollars effectively. But you need to be able to see how it's working in order to make sure it's being done effectively. So that real-time data is super important, and keeping control of your fixed expenses. It is significantly easier, I'm going to say it again, significantly easier to reduce your fixed expenses by 10% than to increase your contribution margin dollars by 10%. You can do it. It's just much, much harder. That's where we get into like conversion rate optimization, average order value, AOV, all those things, like this massive thing, the efficiency that happens inside of your marketing, because your advertising dollars are variable expenses. They exist and drive revenue. So it's harder to drive more contribution margin dollars than it is to decrease your fixed expenses. So if you're having a hard time figuring out why you are or are not profitable, one, we can help with that. Obviously, that's what we do. But look at your fixed expenses. It is the number one place that companies get in trouble, and try to figure out things you can do and ways that you can reduce those fixed expenses. And you will 100% of the time, your business will be healthier as a result of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. So there, obviously for this year, there's many changes. Money's flowing like a river. It's changing directions. It constantly does. It always does.
Yeah.
And moves around. So what are you kind of hesitant about this year maybe and just kind of waiting to see what happens? And what are you really bullish on in your business going through this year?
I mean, I think that it's going to continue. We're going into an election cycle, so who knows? I mean,
That's true.
who knows?
Yeah.
They tend to be reasonably volatile. I have no reason to believe this one is going to be any different.
Ad costs go up like crazy, right?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah. The networks will go nuts. And I mean, that's already a difficult place. So that's definitely not going to get easier. I think coupled with the fact that it's much, much harder and continuing to get harder to raise money to fund businesses, especially in the consumer product world. Like consumer products are getting hammered right now. Exit valuations are absolutely getting hammered right now. We were super, super lucky to sell Bottle Keeper when we did. It was sort of like accidentally at the peak of all of that. Really fortunate. Yeah. Obviously, that's just pure luck timing. So I think that companies are going to continue to struggle a bit and have to figure out how to get profitable or very close to it to be able to go and raise some amount of money to continue to fund or really need to be able to become self-sufficient.
Keep that self-sufficiency if at all possible.
Yeah,
run lean or run very smart on any capitalization for things that you're putting money towards. No doubt about it. It's great wisdom. So is there a question I didn't ask you or something we didn't talk about you wanted to cover?
No, I mean, I love talking about this stuff. My whole next chapter, which Pentane is built around, is helping other early stage operators answer questions that are hard to answer, or frankly, in a lot of cases, you may not even know to ask.
Yeah.
So I'm laser focused on that, not just in what we're doing at Pentane, but spending a huge amount of time with early stage operators who's doing everything I can to help. I have a lot to give back.
Excellent. So. All right, final question I always like to ask people because it gives a little insight into who they are personally. But if there was someone I could introduce you to in all time and space, maybe now, and we can tag them in the comments, and you sit down and have a lunch, talk to them, pick their brain, who would that be? Who would you want to be?
Einstein, 100%.
Einstein. Just, wow, that was fast. Yeah, some people stop and think about it.
Yeah.
Why that? Why so fast? Why is that on your mind?
The way that I do this with my daughter is 5.5, and we spend a lot of time. I mean, my background was heavily science. My degree was molecular and cellular biology. And I had a bunch of minors, all science related because of that degree. And the way that obviously his accomplishments are amazing and everything, but the way that he thought through problem solving effectively, he takes something very complicated and distill it down to the most simple thought bubble was absolutely fascinating. And you can see, if you read a biography or whatnot, or see a documentary on him, you can see the way that he was able to mentally simplify really complex things and add creativity to them to come up with these, at the time, relativity being a perfect example of these like very abstract, couldn't be real things that many of which have proven out to be very real. Yeah, I think that'd be a fascinating coffee to have.
Okay, excellent. That one I can't make happen. I'm sorry. I don't like
That's okay.
There's no seancing going on over here. I can't tag him in the comments. I'm sorry about that one. I usually joke there's 6 degrees of separation if somebody's alive. But hey, Einstein's a great answer. I love it, man. That's your answer. That's cool. And I appreciate you coming on today, sharing some insights and wisdom. Guys, check out the show notes. Have a conversation with Adam if it makes sense to learn a little bit more. And especially it sounds like at the fundamental stages of understanding the business. And we talk about that a lot at the profitability stage, and knowing your numbers and not running your business by gut feel should be kind of a common theme that I took away from today's call. And I hope you do as well. Adam, thank you so much for joining me, brother.
Thanks for having me, Neil. Really fun.
As always, like, share, and comment. If you didn't like something, tell us anyways. Help the algorithm boost it out. Help us beat big tech and give this message out for Adam. Guys, have a great day. We'll talk soon.